The worst decisions of my life lasted less than 5 seconds. That's what I tell people when they ask how I ended up kissing a stranger in a crowded subway station at 11:30 on a rainy Thursday night. At the time, I wasn't thinking about consequences. I wasn't thinking about tomorrow. I was thinking about the footsteps behind me. Fast, steady, getting closer. My lungs burned as I pushed through the evening crowd at Grand Central Station. Commuters flowed around me in waves, umbrellas dripping onto polished floors, conversations blending into a dull roar beneath the station's vaulted ceiling. Normally, a place packed with hundreds of people would have made me feel safe. That night it didn't, because no matter where I turned, I kept seeing the same man. Dark jacket, grey baseball cap, watching, following. Maybe it sounds paranoid. Maybe I would have thought the same thing a week earlier. But after the strange messages started appearing on my phone, and after someone had shown up outside my apartment building twice in 3 days, paranoia felt a lot like survival. I tightened my grip on my purse and hurried toward the downtown platform. The train schedule above me flashed a delay notice. 7 minutes. 7 minutes suddenly felt like forever. I glanced over my shoulder. The man was there again. Not rushing, not hiding, just walking, watching. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I moved deeper into the station, weaving through travelers, dragging suitcases and office workers rushing home. The smell of coffee drifted from a nearby kiosk. Somewhere a child laughed. Somewhere else a train screeched against steel tracks. Everything felt fear crawling up my spine. I reached for my phone. No signal, of course. The underground levels always had terrible reception. Think, Sophia, I whispered to myself. Just think. Security? Too far. Exit? Too crowded. The footsteps behind me seemed louder now. Then I saw him. At first he didn't look real. He stood near one of the marble columns overlooking the main concourse, tall and completely still while the world moved around him. Dark overcoat, black suit underneath, hands tucked casually into his pockets. Men stood nearby, not close enough to appear obvious, but close enough that I immediately recognized what they were. Security, protection. The kind of men who scanned rooms instead of looking at them, the kind who noticed everything, and everyone else seemed to notice him too. People gave him space without realizing they were doing it. Conversations softened when he passed. Power arrived before he did. I knew exactly who he was. Everyone in New York knew who he was. Businessman to some people, something far more complicated to others. Stories followed him everywhere. Most of them impossible to verify, all of them intimidating. My heart skipped. An idea appeared. Terrible, reckless, possibly insane, but the man in the grey cap had just stepped onto the same level, and his eyes locked onto mine. I made my choice. 5 seconds, that was all it took. I crossed the distance between us before my courage disappeared. Sebastian noticed me immediately, sharp, calm, unreadable. For a split second I almost stopped. Then the man behind me took another step. I reached Sebastian, grabbed the front of his coat, rose onto my toes and kissed him. The station disappeared. The noise vanished. My brain stopped functioning entirely. I only remember the shock of what I was doing and the realization that there was no taking it back. Around us, everything seemed to freeze. When I finally pulled away, my entire body felt like it was shaking. Sebastian stared at me, not angry, not confused, just studying me with an intensity that made it difficult to breathe. His eyes moved past my shoulder, toward the crowd behind me, toward the man in the grey cap. Then his attention returned to me. "Interesting choice," he said quietly. His voice was calm, dangerous, only because it was so controlled. "Please," I whispered, "just for 1 minute." Something shifted in his expression. Not much, just enough. Then one corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "Play along," he said. Before I could respond, his arm settled around my waist. Firm, protective, convincing. The kind of gesture that looked completely natural to everyone watching. My heart nearly stopped. I heard movement behind me. The man in the grey cap had paused. Sebastian's gaze lifted over my shoulder. Cold, direct. Whatever message passed between them didn't require words. After several seconds, the man turned and disappeared into the crowd. Relief hit me so hard my knees nearly gave out. I hadn't realized how terrified I'd been until that moment. Sebastian noticed. Of course he noticed. Men like him probably noticed everything. "There," he said softly. "Your problem seems to be leaving." I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. "Thank you." His eyes remained fixed on mine. "You're welcome, Sophia." The blood drained from my face. I had never told him my name. The faint smile vanished from his expression. "Now," he said, glancing toward the station exit as several men in dark suits began moving in our direction. "Why don't you tell me why someone was following you?" And for the first time that night, I realized escaping the stranger behind me might have been the easy part. The first rule of surviving a dangerous situation is simple. Do not trade one problem for a bigger one. Unfortunately, I was beginning to suspect I had done exactly that. Sebastian Romano stood motionless beside me while the crowd continued flowing through Grand Central Station as if nothing unusual had happened. His arm was no longer around my waist, but somehow that felt even more unsettling. Distance should have made me feel safer. Instead, it only reminded me that he was choosing to stay, choosing to watch, choosing to wait for answers. The men who had approached moments earlier stopped a respectful distance away. None of them spoke, none of them needed to. They looked at Sebastian the way employees look at a chief executive officer whose decisions could change their future with a single sentence. Power did not need volume, power simply existed. "I asked you a question," Sebastian said. His voice remained calm. "Why was someone following you?" I swallowed. The station suddenly felt too warm. "I do not know." One dark eyebrow lifted slightly. "That is not true." I looked away. The giant departure board flashed changing schedules above the crowd. Trains arrived. Trains departed. People hurried home to normal lives. I wanted nothing more than to be one of them. Sophia, hearing my name in his voice, made me look back. "You were terrified," he paused. "People do not run through Manhattan subway stations and kiss strangers because everything is fine." Heat rushed into my face. "When you say it like that, it sounds even worse." To my surprise, the corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, not quite amusement. It was certainly memorable. One of the men beside him stepped forward. "Sir." Sebastian glanced at him. The man handed over a phone. Sebastian listened for a few seconds before ending the call. Whatever he heard seemed to confirm something, because his expression hardened slightly. "Interesting." My stomach tightened. "What?" He studied me for a moment. "The man who was following you has already left the station." Relief flooded through me. "Good." "No." His answer came immediately. "Not good." The relief vanished. Why? Because people who are simply curious do not disappear that quickly. The noise of the station seemed to fade again. "You," Sebastian held my gaze. "I think someone wanted to find you." A chill moved through me despite the crowded station. For the past week, I had been trying to convince myself I was imagining things. Strange messages, unfamiliar cars parked near my apartment, the same faces appearing twice in places they should not have been. Every explanation sounded ridiculous when spoken out loud, but hearing someone else acknowledge it made the fear real. Sebastian slipped the phone back to his associate. "How long?" he asked. "About 8 days, I admitted quietly, "maybe 9. And you told no one. Who would I tell?" He did not answer immediately. "The police." I laughed before I could stop myself. It came out more bitter than intended. "And tell them what?" "That someone looked at me twice." His expression suggested he understood my point. Fair. We stood in silence for several seconds. Then he nodded toward a nearby coffee stand. "Come with me." "What?" "You look like you are about to faint." "I am not going to faint." "Good. Then you can explain everything while sitting down." I should have said no. Every instinct I possessed told me to leave, to thank him and disappear before I became involved in whatever world surrounded him. Instead, I followed, maybe because I was exhausted, maybe because I was scared, maybe because for the first time in days, I felt like someone believed me. We sat at a small table near the edge of the station. One of his associates returned carrying 2 coffees. I stared at the cup placed in front of me. "Did he just buy me coffee?" Sebastian glanced down. "Apparently. Do people usually bring you coffee?" "Constantly." I almost smiled. Almost. The warmth of the cup steadied my shaking hand. Sebastian waited. He never rushed me. Somehow that made talking harder. Finally, I told him everything. The messages, the strange encounters, the feeling of being watched. I expected skepticism. Instead, he listened carefully, asking only occasional questions. "You changed your daily routine?" "A few times." "Anyone recently leave your life? Coworkers? Friends? Relationships?" The last word landed heavily. His eyes narrowed. "Recent, 3 months ago. How did it end?" "Not well." He nodded once, not judgmental, not surprised, just filing information away. "Do you think he would do this?" I stared into my coffee. "I do not know anymore." Silence settled between us. Then Sebastian stood. "Come on." "Where?" "You are not going home tonight." My head snapped up. "Excuse me, if someone is watching your apartment, that is the first place they will expect you to go. You cannot be serious." "Unfortunately, I am." My pulse accelerated again. "I barely know you." His answer was immediate. "But I know enough." "Enough for what?" He looked directly into my eyes. "Enough to know you are scared. Enough to know someone is searching for you. And enough to know that if you walk out of this station alone tonight, I will spend the next 6 hours wondering whether you made it home safely." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Then he offered his hand. "Come with me, Sophia. Around us?" The station continued moving. Thousands of strangers rushing toward destinations they already understood. Mine had suddenly become much less clear, and somehow the most dangerous man in the room was beginning to feel like the safest place to stand. Fear has a way of making impossible choices look reasonable. That was the thought repeating in my head as I followed Sebastian Romano through the station and out into the rain-soaked Manhattan night. The city glowed beneath reflections of red taillights and street lamps, every surface shining beneath a thin layer of water. A black SUV waited at the curb, not flashy, not loud, just expensive enough to remind me that I had stepped far outside my normal life. One of Sebastian's associates opened the rear door. I stopped. My instincts finally caught up with me. They said. Sebastian turned toward me. Rain dotted the shoulders of his dark coat. "Probably." I blinked. "That is not reassuring. I was not trying to reassure you." To my surprise, that almost made me laugh. Almost. He gestured toward the vehicle. "Get in, Sophia." I hesitated for 3 more seconds before climbing inside. The door closed behind me with a heavy sound that felt strangely final. Sebastian slid into the seat across from me. The city began moving outside the windows as the SUV pulled into traffic. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. I watched reflections slide across the glass while trying to understand how my evening had gone so completely off the rails. 12 hours earlier, I had been worrying about a project deadline at work. Now I was riding through Manhattan with one of the most powerful men in the city. Life was weird. "What do you do?" Sebastian asked suddenly. "What? For work?" "Graphic design." He nodded. "Do you enjoy it?" The question caught me off guard. "Sometimes." That sounds like a no. It sounds like rent is expensive. Another almost smile appeared, tiny, brief, gone before I could be certain I had seen it. The silence returned. Oddly, it felt less uncomfortable now. 15 minutes later, the SUV entered a private underground garage beneath a glass tower overlooking the East River. I stared upward as we stepped out. The building looked like something from an architecture magazine. Steel, glass, clean lines, the kind of place people posted online with captions about success. We entered a private elevator. No buttons, no keypads. The elevator simply moved up, higher and higher above Manhattan. My stomach tightened. "Exactly how high are we going?" I asked. "Very." "Helpful." I try. The doors finally opened. I stepped into a penthouse larger than my entire apartment floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city stretching endlessly into the distance. Lights sparkled across the river. Boats moved like tiny stars beneath the darkness. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. "Wow." Sebastian removed his coat. That reaction seems popular. Do people usually say wow? Almost everyone. One of the staff members appeared carrying tea. Another brought a tray of food. Nobody seemed surprised that I was there. Nobody asked questions. They simply worked with quiet efficiency and disappeared again. "This is insane," I muttered. "You should see it during Christmas." I turned toward him. "Are you always like this?" "Like what?" "Calm." He considered the question. "No." Somehow that answer felt more honest than if he had claimed otherwise. I sat carefully on the edge of a sofa that probably cost more than my car. Sebastian remained standing near the windows. The city lights reflected faintly in his eyes. "You still think someone is looking for me?" I asked quietly. His expression became serious again. "Yes." My stomach dropped. "Based on what?" "Based on experience." "It is the only answer you are getting tonight," I sighed. "You really are impossible. I have heard that before." Another silence settled between us. Then his phone rang. The change in his expression happened immediately. Not fear, not concern. Focus. He listened for less than a minute before ending the call. Something had changed. I could feel it. "What happened?" I asked. Sebastian looked at me. "One of my people checked your apartment building." My pulse accelerated. "And someone was there." The room suddenly felt colder. "A man matching the description you gave." Every muscle in my body tightened. "You are serious." "I am always serious." My mouth went dry. The fear I had been trying to suppress all week returned at full force. For the first time, there was proof. I had not imagined it. I had not exaggerated it. Someone had really been watching. Sebastian crossed the room and stopped a few feet away. "You are safe here." 4 simple words. I wanted to believe them. More than that, I realized I already did. That frightened me almost as much as everything else. Because trust should take time, trust should be earned. Yet somehow, after only a few hours, the one person who felt capable of protecting me was standing directly in front of me. Sebastian glanced toward the city beyond the glass. "Get some rest. What about tomorrow?" He met my eyes again. "Tomorrow," he said calmly, "we figure out why someone is searching for you. and as I watched the lights of Manhattan shimmer beyond the windows, I realized my life had officially crossed a line it could never uncross. The next morning, I woke up convinced the previous night had been some elaborate stress-induced dream. Then I opened my eyes and found myself staring at a skyline worth several $1,000,000. Sunlight poured through walls of glass, turning the East River into a sheet of liquid gold. For a few seconds I simply lay there listening to the quiet hum of the city far below. Then reality returned. Sebastian Romano, the subway station, the man following me, my apartment building, none of it had been a dream. I sat up slowly and noticed a garment bag hanging near the bedroom door. A small note rested on top. "Breakfast is at 8. You looked like you needed sleep." The handwriting was neat, precise, annoyingly confident. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no new messages. That should have made me feel better. Instead, it felt wrong, was almost suspicious after a week of constant anxiety. 20 minutes later, I stepped into the dining area and nearly stopped walking. The breakfast table looked like something from a luxury hotel advertisement. Fresh fruit, coffee, pastries, eggs, more food than one person could reasonably eat before noon. Sebastian sat at the far end of the table reading something on a tablet. He glanced up as I approached. "Good morning. Do you always feed people like this?" I asked. "Only the ones who break into my evening by kissing me in public." I nearly choked on air. His expression remained perfectly straight. "You enjoy bringing that up, a little." I dropped into a chair. "You are impossible. That appears to be becoming a theme." One of the staff members placed coffee in front of me. I accepted it like a life-saving medical treatment. For several minutes we ate in silence. Surprisingly comfortable silence. Not awkward, not forced, just quiet. Eventually Sebastian set his tablet down. "I have a proposal." The words immediately made me suspicious. "That sounds dangerous." "Probably. You keep saying that because it keeps being true." I narrowed my eyes. "What kind of proposal?" He folded his hands. 30 days of what? "You stay under my protection." I almost dropped my coffee cup. "Absolutely not. You have not heard the rest." "I do not need the rest, Sophia." His voice remained calm. "Someone is looking for you, and eventually they will stop." "Maybe." The single word landed heavily. "Maybe? I prefer certainty." I leaned back. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Sebastian looked toward the windows for a moment before answering. "For the next 30 days you stay here." "No," and publicly he paused. "You are my girlfriend." I stared at him. Then I laughed. Then I realized he was serious and stopped laughing immediately. "That is the worst idea I have ever heard." "It is actually a very good idea." "For who? For both of us." I pointed at myself. "You met me yesterday." "Technically you met me," I groaned. "Please stop being difficult." "I am not being difficult. I am being realistic." He looked genuinely unconvinced. "Think about it. Anyone watching you already saw us together. That does not mean we need to pretend to date." "No," he said calmly, "but it means they will believe it if we do." I hated how logical that sounded. Why would that help? "Because people tend to reconsider their decisions when they believe you belong under my protection." The word "belong" caught my attention immediately. Something about it felt heavier than the rest of the sentence. "And what do you get out of this arrangement?" I asked. Hesitated. The first real hesitation I had seen from him. "My family has been encouraging me to appear more settled." "Settled? That is the polite version. And the impolite version?" A faint smile appeared. "Married." I almost laughed again. "So your solution is to borrow a fake girlfriend? Temporary. 30 days. 30 days. I rubbed my forehead. The entire conversation sounded insane, yet the more I thought about it, the harder it became to dismiss. Someone had been watching me. Someone had appeared at my apartment, and despite every warning bell in my head, I felt safer sitting across from Sebastian than I had felt in weeks. He studied me carefully. "You do not have to answer immediately." "Good, but I would appreciate an answer before lunch." "That is not much time." "It is more than you gave me in the subway station." I pointed at him. "You are never letting that go." "Probably not." The conversation ended there, but the idea stayed with me all morning. As I wandered through the penthouse, staring out at Manhattan from impossible heights, I kept turning the proposal over in my head. 30 days, one fake relationship, one temporary lie. It sounded simple when framed that way, except deep down I knew simple things rarely changed lives, complicated things did. And standing beside the window overlooking the city, I found myself wondering whether saying yes might be the beginning of something neither of us expected. By lunchtime, I had made exactly zero progress toward a decision. That should have surprised me. It did not. Every argument in favor of Sebastian's proposal came with an equally convincing reason to run in the opposite direction. I stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows watching ferries cross the East River while Manhattan stretched endlessly beyond the glass. 30 days. A temporary protection, none of it sounded real, yet neither had meeting Sebastian Romano in a subway station 24 hours earlier. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. I turned to find one of the staff members standing nearby. "Mr. Romano asked me to bring this to you." She handed me a tablet before quietly leaving. Curious, I sat down and opened it. My stomach dropped almost immediately. Photographs filled the screen. My apartment building, the coffee shop near my office, the grocery store 2 blocks from my apartment, different dates, different times, different angles. In several of them, the same man appeared somewhere in the background. Grey cap, dark jacket, watching, waiting, following. My mouth went dry. Suddenly, this was no longer about instinct or suspicion. It was real. Someone had been tracking my routine. Someone had been studying my life. The realization sent a chill through me. I heard footsteps behind me. Sebastian entered the room carrying a cup of coffee. One look at my face told him everything. "You saw the photographs." It was not a question. I nodded slowly. "How long have you had these?" "Since this morning." "You investigated me. I investigated the situation." Somehow that distinction mattered to him. "And?" I asked quietly. "And I do not like what I found." Fear tightened in my chest. "Who is he?" Sebastian sat across from me. "We do not know yet. That is not comforting." "I know. He rarely pretended things were better than they were." Oddly, that honesty made me trust him more. "You really think I should stay here?" I asked. "Yes, and pretend to be your girlfriend for 30 days. I stared at him. "You realize normal people do not solve problems this way." I stopped being normal a very long time ago. The answer came without arrogance. Just looked back at the photographs. Every excuse I had invented over the past week suddenly felt foolish. "There would be rules," I said. Sebastian raised an eyebrow. "Rules? If I agree." For the first time all day, genuine amusement flickered across his face. "Go on," I pointed toward him. "Rule number 1, this remains fake, obviously. Rule number 2, no controlling my life. Define controlling. You know exactly what controlling means." "Fair enough." Rule number 3, I keep my independence, within reason. That sounds suspicious. Everything sounds suspicious when you say it. Despite myself, I laughed. The tension eased slightly. Sebastian leaned back in his chair. "Any other rules?" I thought for a moment. "No surprises." "That is unfortunate." "Sebastian, fine." A silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. Then he stood and extended his hand. 30 days? My eyes dropped to his hand. Strong. Steady. Waiting, I could still walk away. I could leave the penthouse, return to my apartment, pretend everything would somehow solve itself. But deep down, I already knew I would spend every night looking over my shoulder, wondering who was watching, wondering when the next message would arrive, wondering if I was safe. For the first time in days, I had another option. Slowly, I stood. 30 days, I agreed. Sebastian's expression remained calm, but something softened briefly in his eyes. Good. I shook his hand. The agreement felt strangely official, almost danger. I asked. "Now," he said, "we convince everyone else." Less than 3 hours later, I discovered exactly what he meant. My phone exploded with notifications, messages, social media alerts, news articles, photographs. My eyes widened as I stared at the screen. There we were, leaving Grand Central Station together, sitting at the coffee stand, entering the SUV. The headlines were already spreading across New York. "Mystery woman seen with Sebastian Romano. New relationship confirmed." Romano appears up in disbelief. "You work fast." Sebastian glanced at the screen. "Not me. You expect me to believe that?" "No." I shook my head. Somewhere between panic and laughter, I found myself smiling. The entire city apparently believed I was dating one of the most powerful men in New York. My co-workers probably believed it. My neighbors probably believed it. Complete strangers definitely believed it. And for the next 30 days, I was supposed to believe it too. Sebastian noticed my expression. "Regretting your decision already?" I looked out at the city beyond the windows. The truth was complicated. I was scared, confused, completely out of my depth. But beneath all of that, something else had appeared. Curiosity. "Ask me again tomorrow," I said. His faint smile, "You would say that." 3 days into our arrangement, I learned something important about Sebastian Romano. He was far less intimidating at breakfast than he was on television. That realization arrived while I watched him argue with the penthouse chef about blueberries. Apparently, there was an ongoing disagreement regarding the correct amount of fruit that should appear in a smoothie. I stood near the kitchen island holding a cup of coffee while the two of them debated with surprising seriousness. "You are smiling," Sebastian observed without looking at me, "because this is ridiculous. Nutrition is important. You are arguing about 6 blueberries. 7. That does not help your case." To my surprise, the chef laughed. Sebastian looked mildly offended. I spent the rest of the morning trying unsuccessfully to stop smiling. It was becoming increasingly difficult to connect the man I saw every day with the larger-than-life figure the media described. The version in front of me was still powerful, still confident, still impossible, but he was also human in ways I had not expected. That afternoon he insisted I continue working remotely instead of putting my life on hold. A temporary office appeared inside the penthouse within hours. New monitors, better equipment, faster internet. I stared at the setup in disbelief. "You realize most people do not solve problems by buying an entire office." Sebastian glanced at the screens. "The old setup looked inefficient. You never even saw my old setup." I saw enough. Somehow that answer felt completely consistent with his personality. The days settled into a strange rhythm after that. Mornings began with coffee and sarcastic conversations. Afternoons disappeared into work. Evenings often ended with dinner overlooking the city. We talked about everything except the things that mattered most. He never pushed me to discuss my fears. I never asked questions about parts of his life he clearly preferred to keep private. The arrangement remained simple, temporary, controlled, safe. At least that was what I kept telling myself. On the 4th evening, I found him sitting alone on the terrace overlooking Manhattan. The city glittered beneath us like a field of stars. A cool breeze moved through the air. "You are thinking again," I said. Sebastian looked over his shoulder. "Is it that obvious?" "Only when you stare at the skyline like it owes you money." A faint laugh escaped him. I settled into the chair beside him. For several minutes we simply watched the city together. Ferries moved across the dark water. Traffic flowed endlessly below. Somewhere far away, a helicopter crossed the night sky. "Do you ever stop working?" I asked. "Occasionally." That was not a real answer, it was the best one available. I shook my head. "You are exhausting, and yet you continue sitting here." The comment should not have affected me. For some reason it did. I looked away first. The next morning brought a new challenge. Sebastian's family was hosting a charity gala at one of Manhattan's most exclusive hotels. Naturally, our appearance together was expected. "Absolutely not," I said the moment he mentioned it. "I do not belong at events like that. Neither do most people attending. That is not helping." He handed me a black invitation card. Elegant lettering covered the front. The guest list included politicians, business leaders, celebrities, and people whose names appeared regularly on magazine covers. "This is your fault," I informed him. "Technically, the subway station was your fault. You are enjoying this entirely too much." "A little." By evening, I found myself standing in front of a mirror while a stylist worked on my hair. The entire situation felt surreal. 20 days earlier, I had been living a completely ordinary life. Now I was preparing to attend one of New York's most exclusive social events as the supposed girlfriend of Sebastian Romano. Somewhere along the way, reality had become very flexible. When I finally stepped into the main living area, Sebastian looked up from his phone. For a brief moment he said nothing. His expression changed so slightly most people would have missed it. I did not. "What?" I asked. "Nothing." That was definitely something. He stood and straightened his jacket. "You look nice." The compliment was simple, direct, somehow that made it more meaningful. My heart performed an unexpected little flip that I immediately blamed on nerves. Nothing else. Definitely nerves. We entered the elevator together. As the doors closed, I caught our reflections in the mirrored walls. For the first time, we actually looked like a couple. The thought arrived unexpectedly and lingered longer than it should have. Sebastian noticed my expression. Second thoughts? About tonight? About all of it? The question settled between us. I looked at our reflections again before answering. "Not tonight." His eyes held mine for a second longer than necessary. Then the elevator continued downward, carrying us toward an evening that neither of us realized was about to change everything. The moment we stepped into the ballroom, I understood why people wrote articles about events like this. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead like floating constellations. Music drifted through the room. Conversations blended into a low hum of wealth, influence, and carefully practiced confidence. Everywhere I looked, people seemed perfectly comfortable in a world I barely understood. I tightened my grip on my evening clutch. Sebastian immediately noticed. "Relax. Easy for you to say." "Why?" "Because half the room looks terrified of you." He glanced around. "Only half?" I rolled my eyes. To my annoyance, he looked pleased with himself. We moved through the crowd together. Introductions happened constantly. Business leaders, politicians, philanthropists. Every conversation followed a similar pattern. People greeted Sebastian, their eyes shifted toward me. Curiosity appeared immediately. Some were subtle about it, others were not. I understood why. Until a few weeks ago, nobody had ever seen Sebastian Romano publicly attached to anyone. Yet somehow I had become front-page news. The thought still felt ridiculous. "You are doing fine," Sebastian said quietly as we paused near a large floral display. "I have spoken to 37 strangers in 40 minutes. 38. The woman near the entrance asked where you got your shoes. That counts?" It counted to her. I laughed despite myself. The evening continued. Gradually my nerves faded. The more time I spent beside Sebastian, the easier everything became. People responded to his confidence. Somehow some of that confidence started rubbing off on me. Then something unexpected happened. A group of children entered the ballroom. At first I assumed they belonged to guests. Then I noticed matching jackets embroidered with the name of a pediatric foundation. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Smiles became genuine. Conversations softened. Several children rushed directly towards Sebastian. "Mr. Romano," one little girl shouted. Sebastian's entire expression changed. The transformation was so sudden that I almost forgot to breathe. The intimidating businessman disappeared. In his place stood someone warmer, lighter, human. He crouched down to greet the children at eye level. He remembered names, asked about school, listened carefully to every answer. One young boy proudly showed him a drawing. Sebastian studied it with complete seriousness before praising every detail. The child looked like he had just won an Olympic medal. I stood frozen several feet away. None of this matched the image I had built in my head. "Surprised?" a voice asked beside me. I turned and found an older woman smiling gently. "A little?" She nodded towards Sebastian. "He funds the foundation." "Funds it?" "Almost entirely." My eyes widened. I didn't know that. Most people do not. The woman glanced toward him. "He prefers it that way." Before I could respond, Sebastian looked up and caught me watching. For a second, something shifted inside my chest. Something uncomfortable, something dangerous. Because it is easy to dismiss a powerful man, it is harder to dismiss kindness. Much harder. Later that evening, I excused myself to find a quiet corner and clear my head. The ballroom felt warmer now, louder. My emotions were becoming increasingly difficult to organize. I stepped into a quieter hallway lined with artwork and immediately stopped. Two men stood near an open doorway ahead. One of them looked familiar, very familiar. My stomach tightened instantly. I had seen him before, not in person, in a photograph, the same photograph Sebastian had shown me. The man speaking casually in the hallway was the same one who had appeared near my apartment building, the same one who had followed me. My pulse accelerated. Before I could react, another voice interrupted. "There you are." I turned sharply. Sebastian approached from the opposite direction. Relief washed through me. "Sebastian." He noticed my expression immediately. "What happened?" I looked back toward the hallway. The man was gone. Only one remained. I saw him. Sebastian's eyes narrowed. "Who?" The man from the photographs. Every trace of warmth disappeared from his expression. He followed my gaze. Silence stretched between us. Then something strange happened. Recognition appeared in his eyes. Not surprise. Recognition. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "You know him," I whispered. Sebastian did not answer immediately. That alone was answer enough. Finally, he exhaled slowly. Unfortunately, my pulse hammered. "Who is he?" His jaw tightened. "My cousin." The words hit harder than I expected. "Your cousin?" "His name is Victor Romano." My mind struggled to process the information. "The man following me is part of your family." Sebastian's gaze remained fixed on the empty hallway. Apparently, for the first time since meeting him, I saw something close to genuine concern. "For me." "Sebastian," I said quietly, "why would your cousin be watching me?" He looked at me. The answer in his eyes was somehow worse than any words, because he did not know, and if Sebastian Romano did not know what his own cousin was planning, then whatever came next was far more dangerous than either of us had imagined. The ride back to the penthouse felt longer than the drive to the gala. Neither of us spoke much. Manhattan drifted past the windows in streaks of gold and white while my thoughts chased themselves in circles. Victor Romano, the name repeated endlessly in my head. The man who had appeared outside my apartment. The man who had followed me through the city. The man connected to Sebastian by blood. None of it made sense. When we finally reached the penthouse, Sebastian headed directly toward his office. "I need to make a few calls," he said. "A few?" I asked. "Probably more than a few." I nodded. He paused before entering the room. "Stay here tonight." I was planning to. His expression softened slightly. "Good. Then he disappeared behind the door. I spent the next hour sitting beside the windows, staring out at the city while trying to organize the pieces. Every answer seemed to create 3 new questions. Why would Victor watch me before I ever met Sebastian? Why follow me for days? Why reveal himself at the gala? The last question bothered me most. If Victor wanted to stay hidden, he would have stayed hidden. Yet somehow I felt like he wanted me to see him. That thought refused to leave. Around midnight, I wandered into the kitchen searching for water and found one of Sebastian's associates standing near the counter. His name was Marco. He had been around constantly during the past few weeks, professional, quiet, observant. "You should be sleeping," he said. "You sound exactly like Sebastian. That is unfortunate for both of us." I smiled despite myself. Then a thought occurred to me. "Can I ask you something?" Marco hesitated. "Maybe." "Victor." His expression immediately changed. Not fear, caution. "What about him? What is he like?" Marco considered the question carefully. "Complicated. That is not an answer. It is the safest answer." I leaned against the trust him. "No." The response came instantly. "Does Sebastian?" Marco looked toward the office door. "He used to." Those 4 words landed heavily. Before I could ask another question, Marco's phone vibrated. He glanced down and frowned. "Interesting." "What?" "Nothing. That definitely means something." He almost smiled. "You spend too much time around Sebastian." Then he walked away before I could stop him. The next morning I woke to the sound of raised voices. Not shouting. Sebastian never shouted. But the tension carried through the walls anyway. Curious, I stepped into the hallway and stopped. Sebastian stood near his office speaking with 2 members of his team. The moment he saw me, the conversation ended. Too quickly. Too neatly. "Good morning," he said. "You are hiding something." His eyebrow lifted. "Direct. You interrupted a conversation the second I appeared." One of the men suddenly found the floor very interesting. Sebastian dismissed them with a glance. They left immediately. "Victor left the city," he said after a moment. "That sounds like good news. Maybe." There was that word again. "Maybe." I was beginning to hate maybe. "You do not believe that?" "No." He walked toward the windows. "Victor rarely does anything without a reason. And you think this is part of a plan?" "I know it is." Silence settled between us. Then something unexpected happened. Sebastian looked tired, truly tired, not physically, emotionally, like someone carrying a weight nobody else could see. "You care about him?" He stared at the skyline for several seconds. "He is family." The answer told me everything. Whatever conflict existed between them was not simple. It never is when family becomes involved. The rest of the day passed strangely. I worked. Sebastian worked. Life continued, yet an invisible tension hung over everything. Around 6 that evening, I stepped onto the terrace with a cup of coffee and found an envelope sitting on the outdoor table. No stamp, no address, just my name written neatly across the front. My heart immediately accelerated. Sophia. I stared at it for several seconds before picking it up. Inside was a single photograph. Nothing more. No message, no explanation, just a photograph. The image showed Sebastian and me leaving Grand Central Station on the night we met, taken from across the street, watching us, following us. Beneath the photograph, written in black ink, were 6 simple words: "Ask Sebastian about the night before." My hands went cold. The terrace door opened behind me. I turned and found Sebastian stepping outside. The moment he saw the photograph, every trace of color disappeared from his face. "Where did you get that?" he asked. For the first time since meeting him, his voice carried genuine alarm. I held up the photograph. Sebastian crossed the distance between us immediately. His eyes locked onto the message beneath the image. The silence that followed felt endless. "Sebastian," I whispered, "what happened the night before we met?" He looked at the photograph, then at me, and for the first time he did not have an answer ready. Some truths do not arrive like explosions. They arrive like cracks in glass, spreading quietly until suddenly you cannot see anything the same way again. Sebastian stared at the photograph in silence. The city lights reflected across the terrace windows behind him, but for the first time since I had met him, he looked completely unprepared. That frightened me more than the photograph itself. "Tell me," I said softly. His jaw tightened. "The night before we met, Victor and I had an argument. About what? Control." The answer came immediately. Too immediately. "That is not the whole story." His eyes lifted to mine. "No." The honesty surprised me. Most people would have lied. Sebastian simply looked exhausted. He motioned toward the living room. "Come inside." We sat across from each other while the photograph rested on the coffee table between us, like evidence neither of us wanted to examine. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, Sebastian leaned forward. "Victor believes the future of the family should move in a different direction than I do. Different how? He believes power comes from fear. His expression hardened slightly. I disagree. I thought about the children at the charity gala, the hospital foundation, the schools and programs I had quietly discovered he funded. Suddenly the conflict made more sense. And this argument happened the night before we met. He nodded. It was supposed to stay private. Instead, I appeared in Grand Central Station and accidentally became part of it. Apparently, I looked down at the photograph again. Why would Victor send this to me? Sebastian did not answer immediately. That hesitation told me enough, because he wants something. From me, from both of us. The room felt smaller. You still do not know why he started watching me before I ever met you? No. His frustration was obvious, and that bothers me. Before I could respond, my phone vibrated. The sound startled both of us. My stomach tightened instantly. Sebastian noticed. Do not answer it. The phone continued vibrating. Then a text appeared. Only one sentence. You deserve the truth. My blood ran cold. Another message arrived immediately afterward. Ask him why your ex-boyfriend disappeared. The room went completely silent. I stared at the screen. My ex-boyfriend. The relationship had ended months ago, unpleasantly but not dramatically. We had stopped speaking, moved on. At least I thought. I looked up. Sebastian, his expression had changed. Not guilt. Not exactly. Something more complicated. Sophia, why would Victor mention my ex? He exhaled slowly. Because he knows it will make you question me. For the first time since meeting him, Sebastian looked away. My heart sank. You know something. I know he contacted you again after the breakup. How? The words escaped before I could stop them. Sebastian rubbed a hand across his jaw. Because I had someone look into your situation after we met. I stared at him. You investigated my ex-boyfriend. Yes, without telling me, yes. The admission landed heavily. Why? His answer came quietly. Because I was worried. The room seemed to tilt. You barely knew me, I know. That does not make sense. It did to me. I stood and walked toward the windows, trying to process everything. Part of me understood why he had done it. Another part felt betrayed. Not because he looked into my past. Because he had chosen not to tell me. Did you find something? I asked without turning around. Silence. Then nothing dangerous. I closed my eyes. But you found something. Enough to know he was not the person you thought he was. I turned back toward him. And you decided to make that decision for me. His expression, no. It feels like it. The words hung between us. Sebastian stood. I was trying to protect you. You do not get to decide what I need protection from. The moment the sentence left my mouth, I saw it hit him. Not anger, hurt. Genuine hurt. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, I grabbed my phone and headed toward the hallway. Sophia, I stopped but did not turn around. I never lied to you. I looked down at the new message still glowing on my screen. You deserve the truth. Somewhere in the city, Victor Romano was smiling, because for the first time since we met, a crack had appeared between Sebastian and me. And the worst part was that I could not tell whether Victor had created it or simply revealed it. The next 2 days felt wrong. Not dramatic, not explosive, just wrong in the quiet way a storm feels wrong before the clouds arrive. Sebastian gave me space after our argument, too much space. We still crossed paths at breakfast, still exchanged polite conversations, still maintained the appearance of a couple whenever cameras or reporters appeared nearby. But something had shifted. The easy rhythm we had built over the past few weeks had disappeared. Every interaction felt careful, measured, like both of us were avoiding a conversation neither wanted to have. I hated it. More than that, I hated how much I missed the version of us that existed before Victor's messages. On the third morning, I found myself standing alone in the penthouse kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. My phone sat beside it. The screen displayed another message from an unknown number. Victor had not stopped. He never threatened me, never demanded anything. That was what made it worse. Every message contained small pieces of information, questions, doubts, suggestions, tiny seeds designed to grow into larger problems. Ask him why he never told you everything. Ask him why he knew your name so quickly. Ask him why he investigated your life before you agreed to trust him. Individually, the messages seemed harmless. Together, they were poison, because they forced me to question things I had never considered before. The elevator chimed softly. I looked up as Sebastian entered the kitchen. He immediately noticed the phone in my hand. Another message? I nodded. He walked closer. May I see it? For a moment I considered refusing. Then I handed him the phone. His expression darkened slightly as he read the screen. He wants us fighting, maybe, not maybe. His voice was calm but firm, definitely. I folded my arms. Then why does it keep working? The question surprised both of us. Sebastian looked at me carefully. Because you are starting to believe him. No, Sophia, I looked away. The silence stretched. Finally, I exhaled. I do not know what I believe anymore. The confession felt heavier than I expected. Sebastian set the phone down. Then believe this. I glanced back at him. What? Victor is lying about one thing. Which thing? That he cares about the truth. The certainty in his voice caught my attention. How do you know? For a second, something painful crossed his face. Gone almost immediately, because I spent 20 years believing he did. The answer stayed with me long after the conversation ended. That afternoon I made a decision. Maybe it was reckless. Maybe it was stupid. But I was tired of being manipulated by shadows. While Sebastian attended meetings downtown, I left the penthouse for the first time in nearly a week. Marco protested immediately. Absolutely not. I am going for coffee. That is not the point. I am not a prisoner. His expression softened slightly. Nobody said you were. Then stop treating me like one. 20 minutes later, I found myself sitting inside a small coffee shop 3 blocks from the penthouse. The place smelled like cinnamon and roasted beans. Normal, ordinary. For the first time in weeks, I felt almost like myself again. Then someone sat down across from me. I looked up. Victor Romano smiled. My heart stopped, not from fear, from shock. He looked nothing like the monster I had imagined. Well-dressed, calm, polite. Almost somehow made him more unsettling. Hello, Sophia. Every instinct told me to leave. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was. You have a lot of nerve. His smile widened slightly. I have heard that before. Great. Apparently, arrogance was a family trait. Victor folded his hands. A conversation. You have been following me. Watching, he corrected gently. There is a difference, not to me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Victor's expression became serious. You think Sebastian is protecting you? He is, maybe. Hearing that word from someone else made my stomach tighten immediately, Victor noticed. The problem with Sebastian, he continued, is that he always decides what is best for everyone around him. The words hit harder than I wanted to admit, because they sounded familiar, because a small part of me had already wondered the same thing. Victor leaned back slightly. Tell me something. No. Why did he never tell you how accelerated? What does that mean? Victor stared at me for several seconds. Then he smiled again, not warmly, not kindly, like someone who had finally revealed the piece of information he wanted me to hear. You still think meeting you was an accident. The world seemed to tilt beneath me. Before I could respond, Victor stood, asked Sebastian where he was 1 week before Grand Central. He placed money on the table and walked away. I remained frozen long after he disappeared. Because for the first time since this nightmare began, I was no longer certain who was telling the truth. The hardest part about doubt is that it sounds reasonable. By the time I returned to the penthouse, Victor's words had already started settling into places I wished they could not reach. You still think meeting you was an accident. The sentence repeated itself during the elevator ride. It followed me through the hallway. It sat beside me as I stared out at the city from the living room windows. I hated that it affected me. I hated that part of me wanted answers. Most of all, I hated that I was no longer sure whether asking those questions would help or destroy whatever existed between Sebastian and me. The penthouse was unusually quiet. Evening sunlight stretched across the floor in long golden lines. For a moment, I considered keeping the conversation with Victor to myself. Then I remembered every problem that had followed secrecy so far. That idea lasted approximately 30 seconds. Sebastian walked through the front door just after 7. The moment he saw me, he stopped. What happened? No greeting, no small talk, just Emini too well now. I saw Victor. The warmth disappeared from his expression. Where? A coffee shop. His jaw tightened. Alone? Yes. Sophia. The disappointment in his voice hit harder than anger would have. Do not, I stood. Do not turn this into another conversation about protection. Then what should I call it? The truth. Silence filled the room. Sebastian set his keys on the table. What did he say? I looked directly at him. He said, I still think meeting you was an accident. For the first time, Sebastian looked genuinely stunned, not defensive, not guilty. Just surprised. That is what he told you? Yes. And you believed him? I do not know what I believe anymore. The honesty hurt. His expression softened immediately. That somehow made everything worse. Sophia, just answer the question. My voice cracked slightly. Where were you 1 week before Grand Central? He stared at me for several seconds, then something unexpected happened. He laughed, not because it was funny, because he finally understood that is his game. Sebastian, I was in Boston. The answer came immediately. For 3 days. Doing what? Attending meetings for the Children's Foundation. I blinked. That is it, that is it. The certainty in his voice made me hesitate. He walked toward a nearby cabinet, opened a drawer and removed a folder. Here, I took it carefully. Inside were schedules, event photographs, public appearances, meeting records. Everything matched. Everything confirmed his story. My stomach sank. Victor had known exactly what question to plant because he knew the answer would sound suspicious before it sounded ordinary. Sebastian watched realization spread across my face. Now do you understand? He asked quietly. I closed the folder. He wanted me to doubt you. Yes. Why? A shadow crossed Sebastian's face. Because if he cannot control me, he will try to isolate me. The room fell silent again. The emotional exhaustion hit me all at once. Weeks of fear, confusion, suspicion, constant uncertainty. I was tired, so incredibly tired. Sebastian lowered himself into the chair across from me. Neither of us spoke for a while. Why did you stay? The question surprised him. What? You could have ended this weeks ago. I gestured vaguely around us. This arrangement, me, all of it. His eyes held mine. Do you really want that answer? My heartbeat quickened. Yes, he exhaled slowly, because somewhere between the subway station and now, it stopped feeling temporary. The room seemed to go completely still. No city noise, no traffic, nothing. Just those words. I stared at him. Sebastian, I know. His voice was quiet. Believe me, I know. Every emotion I had spent weeks trying to ignore suddenly rushed to the surface. The breakfasts, the conversations, the way he always noticed when something was wrong, the way he remembered details nobody else remembered. The way the penthouse had started feeling like home. I had spent so much time worrying about whether I could trust him that I had ignored a far more dangerous question. What if I cared about him? Before either of us could say another word, Marco appeared in the doorway. One look at his face told me something was wrong. Sebastian. The single word carried urgency. Sebastian stood immediately. What happened? Marco handed him a phone. Sebastian listened for less than 10 seconds. Every trace of emotion disappeared from his face. He ended the call and looked directly at me. Victor is gone. Confusion replaced everything else. Gone where? Nobody knows. The answer settled heavily in the room, because people do not simply disappear without a reason, and deep down, all three of us understood the same thing. Victor Romano was not running away. He was preparing for something. The next 48 hours felt like waiting for thunder after seeing lightning. Nobody knew where Victor was. Nobody knew what he was planning. Yet somehow his absence felt louder than his presence ever had. The penthouse became a strange mixture of activity and silence. Phones rang constantly. Meetings appeared and disappeared. People came and went at all hours. Through it all, Sebastian remained calm, too calm. I noticed the difference because I knew him now. The version everyone else saw looked composed and controlled. The version I saw was sleeping less, thinking more, and carrying a level of concern he tried very hard to hide. On the second evening, I found him standing alone beside the windows overlooking Manhattan. The city glowed beneath the darkness. Thousands of lights, millions of lives, endless movement. He had not noticed me enter the room. You are doing it again, I said. He glanced over. Doing what? Staring at the skyline like it owes you money. To my relief, a faint smile appeared. I remember that. Good, I stepped beside him because I am running out of original material. Silence settled comfortably between us. Not awkward, not forced, comfortable. That realization alone felt important. Somewhere along the way, Sebastian had become the person I looked for first. The person whose presence made everything easier. The person whose absence I noticed immediately. The truth hit me with surprising clarity. Not with the idea of him, not with the headlines or the rumors or the power people associated with his name. Him, the man who argued about blueberries, the man who remembered every child's name at a charity event. The man who quietly made life better for people without asking for credit. The realization should have terrified me. Instead, it felt strangely peaceful. What are you thinking about? Sebastian asked. I looked away toward the city. Dangerous things. That sounds concerning. It probably is. Before he could ask another question, Marco appeared in the doorway. His expression immediately erased the calm atmosphere. We found him. Sebastian turned. Victor? Marco nodded. And we know why he disappeared. The room seemed to tighten around us. Marco handed over a folder. Sebastian opened it and read silently. The longer he looked, the more his expression changed. Not anger, relief, pure relief. What? I asked. Sebastian looked up. Victor was not planning to hurt you. My heart, all of this. He handed me the folder. Inside were photographs, documents, financial records, newspaper clippings. At first they seemed unrelated. Then the connection appeared. A development company. A charitable housing project. Several families receiving assistance. One name appeared repeatedly. I frowned. I do not understand. Sebastian exhaled slowly. Neither did I. Marco folded his arms. Victor has been investigating someone for months. Who? I asked. Your ex-boyfriend. The room went silent. I stared at him. What? Marco pointed toward the documents. The company he worked for was involved in a fraud investigation. Several vulnerable families lost housing assistance because of falsified records. My stomach dropped. I remembered the excuses, the unexplained business trips, the strange behavior near the end of our relationship. Suddenly pieces started fitting together. Victor discovered it first, Sebastian said quietly. But nobody listened to him. I looked between them. So he followed me arrived. Because he thought I knew something. Marco nodded. Exactly. The answer felt absurd. Weeks of fear, confusion, suspicion. All because Victor believed I might unknowingly hold information connected to an investigation he could not prove. Then why not tell us? I asked. Sebastian gave a humorless laugh. Because Victor has never believed in simple solutions. Another silence followed. He answered, listened briefly, and suddenly smiled. It was the first time I had ever seen him smile. Well, he said, that solves the rest of it. What now? Sebastian asked. Marco lowered the phone. Victor turned everything over to federal investigators this morning. I blinked. Voluntarily? Apparently. Sebastian stared at the documents. Then something remarkable happened. He laughed. Genuine laughter. Relief. Disbelief. Family frustration. He spent weeks creating chaos to help people. Sounds like family, Marco replied. For the first time in what felt like forever, the weight hanging over all of us disappeared. No hidden conspiracy. No dangerous secret. No trap waiting around the corner, just a stubborn man who had chosen the most complicated path imaginable. Later that night, after everyone else had left, Sebastian and I stood alone on the terrace. The city stretched endlessly beneath the stars. So, I said, we survived, apparently. Victor is still insane, definitely. I smiled. Then the smile faded, because there was one truth left that had nothing to do with Victor, nothing to do with investigations, nothing to do with fear, just us. Sebastian looked at me. What is it? My heart accelerated. The 30 days are almost over. Something changed in his eyes immediately. The silence that followed felt larger than the city spread beneath us, because both of us knew the same thing. The arrangement was ending. The question was whether what came next was ending too. People think endings arrive with certainty. In my experience, they arrive with a question. The 30 days ended on a quiet Tuesday morning. No dramatic countdown. No celebration, no announcement, just a date on a calendar that suddenly became today. I stood in the penthouse kitchen staring at a cup of coffee while Manhattan woke beyond the windows. The city looked exactly the same. I did not. Somewhere during those 30 days, my life had divided into before and after, before Sebastian Romano. The realization followed me throughout the morning. By noon I had packed my things, not much, a few bags, a laptop, clothes, the ordinary pieces of a very ordinary life. Yet carrying them toward the elevator felt strangely impossible. Marco are really leaving? I smiled sadly. That was always the plan. He nodded once. For what it is worth, the place will be quieter. You are terrible at emotional speeches. I know. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he surprised me. He loves you. My breath caught. Marco immediately looked annoyed with himself. Pretend I did not say that. Marco, too late. Before I could ask another question, he walked away, leaving me alone with words I had secretly been hoping to hear and secretly been terrified to hear. An hour later, I stood in the lobby of the tower with my bags beside me. The driver Sebastian arranged was waiting outside. One final ride, one final goodbye. The elevator doors opened behind me. I knew who it was before I turned around. Sebastian. He crossed the lobby toward me. No bodyguards, no assistants, just him. The sight alone made my heart ache. You are leaving. It was not a question. That was the agreement. He nodded slowly. Right. Silence settled between us. I hated it. I hated how much it hurt Sophia. My name sounded different in his voice now, softer. What? For several seconds he said nothing. Then he laughed quietly and shook his head. I had a speech. A speech? An excellent one. That made me smile. You are looking at me. My heart nearly broke. Because for the first time since I met him, Sebastian Romano looked nervous. Not powerful. Not intimidating. Nervous. The realization changed everything. Then forget the speech, I said softly. His eyes held mine. That might be the smartest thing you have ever said. The lobby seemed to disappear around us. No city, no traffic, no passing strangers. Just the two of us standing in a moment neither wanted to end. Finally, Sebastian exhaled. I am done pretending. My heartbeat stopped. What? The fake relationship. He took a step closer, the temporary arrangement, the convenient excuses. His voice remained calm, but I could hear the truth beneath it. I am done with all of it. Every emotion I had spent weeks trying to manage rushed forward at once. Sebastian, I love you. The words landed between us with breathtaking simplicity, no grand gesture, no dramatic speech, just honesty, pure and unfiltered. I love your stubbornness. I love your terrible timing. I love the way you challenge every decision I make. A faint smile touched his lips. I even love the fact that you kissed a complete stranger in a subway station. I laughed through sudden tears. That was a terrible decision. Best decision of my life. Not because of sadness, because of relief, because I was finally hearing the words I had been carrying in my own heart. You make this very difficult, I whispered. I know, you are impossible, also true. I love you too. The smile that appeared on his face was unlike anything I had ever seen, not controlled, not guarded, pure happiness. For a man who spent most of his life hiding emotion, it felt like witnessing something precious. 6 months later, Manhattan looked different, or maybe I did. The housing project Victor had spent months protecting officially opened its doors. Sebastian funded additional expansion. I joined the board and helped create programs for families rebuilding their lives. Victor attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony. He spent 20 minutes arguing with Sebastian and 15 minutes pretending he was not emotional about the project. Some things never change. 1 year later, friends and family gathered beneath strings of lights overlooking the Hudson River. Laughter drifted through the evening air. Music played softly. The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and rose. I stood beside Sebastian as we exchanged vows, real vows. Not temporary promises, not fake arrangements, real, permanent, true. Later that night, after the guests had gone home and the city lights shimmered across the water, I rested my head against his shoulder. Can I ask you something? I said. Anything. When did you stop pretending? Sebastian looked out at the skyline for a moment before answering. Then he smiled. The second you chose me over fear, the city glowed around us. The future stretched ahead. And for the first time since that rainy night in Grand Central Station, there was nothing left to run from. I had found safety, I had found home, and somehow, against all odds, I had found both in the same person.